So a little bit about these kids that you see around. There are kids that I've been teaching when pandemic happened from September. We started teaching online. Virtual space is not new to me. It's something that I'm used to because I'm immigrant, and I uh, talk to my family through this space. It's a little bit different in VR because that's where you don't see people faces, but it's just virtual space is not very unfamiliar, so it's something familiar for me. And I think what I was trying to do, I was thinking about creating community, and this is one of the communities that through this time happened. I think a lot of us are doing zooming, and it's something totally new for many people, especially for people for education wise, that they're not used to online classes, and especially kids that have no experience of school. So some of these students that I have, they're from 5 to 10 year old, so they are their first time experiencing going to school, and just seeing that how that affects. So I wanted to create this kind of like a community spaces that uh, it's kind of like a totally new space. And what I've been doing, I have a walking practice. I've been and recording the maps of my walks. Idea of owning a land that doesn't belong to me now. It's mine, and then I make a new space. Those spaceships that you see is a kind of like a, I wanted to create that outer space, and it was from my walking path. So I'm gonna read a quote for you. While I was doing a lot of walks, it was, "We do not need to know the destination. You do not need to know the way. We only need to know ourselves." I thought that I'm going to use this quote because it's so relevant to how I walk, and then how I think, and then how I communicate with my, teaching or other environments right now at this moment. So a lot of works that I gave to these students was about how, what they miss about, like what the rest are they missing, that during this pandemic they haven't been to parties, and what are they miss the most. I was asking them to create their own city, which I was hoping that we had the actual scene, but they are not here actually, because I've added so many works. They were creating their own hats. I was referencing a lot of global environmental issues to kind of like bring to their attention, and try to create these virtual with the natural and real space. So I kind of like get all these symbols from nature and bring it in. So these images that you see, some of them are the natural images are from my walk past. I had actually cows and stuff, but you don't see any of them here in this scene. Um, yeah, and one of the things that I really wanted people to have the experience is just like taking selfie, because or not selfie, not necessarily selfie. The selfie is the choice of the camera in the virtual space, but for me, it was part of documentation. It was part of like creating document the moment, the time that we spend, because that's part of how my work has been through. It's just about documenting the time, saving the memories that we have in the area. I want to read another part. Walking faces us with many landscapes. There is the landscape outside of us and the landscape inside of us. We enter landscape, seen and unseen, but we also bring our landscape into it. We too are a landscape, the secret landscape of love, gain and loss, only known to us in remembered and repressed memory. A
Wow.
walker must not only listen to the outside world, a walker must also listen to the inner world. It is only when these two forms of listening are synchronized, the outward with the inward, that the walker has truly become a walking organ of perception. A true listener a part of the landscape. So I really wanted to, these are the quotes from Ernesto, which I had the quote in this space. I mean, this is not, as I said, this is not the right scene that we're looking at, but that's okay. There's a quote from Ernesto Pojol, and then it's from the book Walking Practice, Walking Art Practice. That's the title of the piece. Um, yeah, that's about it. Let me know if you have any question.
Wow. And he was asking if you could put Ernesto's name in the chat, please.
I will.
Thank you. And first of
Yes.
all, thank you so much for this, Minoosh, and also Leah and Queen. I think it's such a beautiful accumulation of these quotes that you shared with us. Are very, like, I think they can also resonate with all of your spaces. How we are a landscape, and with this too, you can actually show it in a different way that people can experience it as landscape. I would be curious how you feel about working in in this virtual realm, or like what would be the translations for you in this space.
I created those kind of like outer space as if a place that we are navigating through. I've been wanted people to feel like by wandering, in virtual space, you don't have that route or path, right, to walk on a surface. So you're flying. So I was trying to actually create that shape, that feeling of flying, representing walking. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that was my intention, and I hope people get that sense of walking around and getting around, or flying, because you don't have because you are floating in the space. It's
Mm-hmm.
not walking surface, and I wanted to bring that because you only can walk on land, and if you're in space you can't walk, right? So this idea of how you're flying but then you're representing that sort of like shape of like the form of navigating through spaces, that's considered as walking. So it's like not necessarily having the footsteps, but it's more about experience and memory and way that you interact or engage with the whatever exists in this space.
Mm-hmm. Mary was asking if you could tell us about the children here, please.
The children's are Yes, the children's are my students that I over past, like from September we started this virtual teaching them art. And one of the things that was so important for me, art class, it has to be in person because physically students have a lot of challenges to understand the technique. And if they stuck somewhere, so you have to be close. And what I was trying more focus on this class was a conceptual idea. So I was navigating through the concepts of how they can understand. When we started, actually, the class was the fire season, and there was so much. I hear a lot of noises. Who's this? Can we mute yourself? Because it's very.
It might was me. I'm sorry about that.
So what I was trying to with these kids are the children's have been taking art classes virtually, and as you can see, some of them have masks, which actually you don't see all of them because it's not the right scene. But it was interesting to me how to show these challenges that kids have at the moment with the education and learning. When they get a stock in learning techniques because you are not next to them physically to help them with the challenges. So how they interpret and how they try to overcome with some difficulties. So I just have the projects that they just interpret. However, I was bringing the subject to them, and then they started making their own projects. Yeah, I hope I answered, Mary. And if you have more, please put in chat so we can answer.
well, I think this is so beautiful. The the correspondence between what you were like your walking practice and when you started talking about the free flow or this flying in the nothingness or the void, and then how you would bring that practice into this space with the children's images that are about how can they communicate and find help, and the fragments of this landscape or that the blob of clouds above that. For me it all seems like this the scattered landscape that um, that your identity would kind of cohesively bring together, and how can you go between these different spaces as kind of a scaffolding, like what are the core grounding parts that are scaffolding you in this. And so the disturb like the images of the children seems very disturbing in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also they carry hope just by like showing or sharing, and somehow your space itself is like this is what I would need, or this is what we could create together, and it certainly feels like you managed to bring community in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
i'm
Thank you.
I'm curious about the wheel. would you would you mind to talk a bit about the wheel or those
The what?
objects? The big
About
wheel,
what?
the the car wheel with the
Yeah,
moss.
that was yeah, that's actually in the original space, so you see more connections, and that's why I'm saying this is not the correct scene, because that's part of I was putting all these elements through my walks that I found. You know, when you walk, your mind is actually traveling and you see so many different things, but at the same time you encounter with new or encounter with whatever places that you step in, right? So I've been in different places, path and trails in the Bay Area, and there was some of the places that I've been to has been close to the beach, and then I found these tire that you could see there. So that's how it's actually. I wanted to bring whatever we find in our environment, like right now whatever you see in the real space, I wanted to create this real space in some sort of like VR shape, as you can see on the left planet, like what I created, but the others are like the spaces and real outer spaces. And then I had these cloud on the which looks like a stone on top of it, which was actually supposed to rain, and I used that, but you don't see it. And then I had fire in a space which you don't see it because this is not in this right in the scene. So I wanted to create these different um, forms of reality of the real nature and elements, natural elements that you see, but then bring it in here. So I thought that this is good to get some objects that you see around your walks and then bring it in this. So kind of like transferring from reality to virtual, and then vice versa, trying to bring water, air, and fire, which it was in the original scene. You don't see it here, um, but that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Something came to my mind is Hito Steyer's in Free Fall, a thought experiment on vertical perspective, where she talks about this experience that he described when we don't have the ground anymore, we don't have the horizon anymore, when we are
Mm-hmm.
in free flow, but also what do we lose, and what is navigation in this space.
Mm.
And for me, the images of the children perfectly click that in, something that I can hold on to,
Mm.
something that when you said that you actually included all these natural elements, and I'm sorry that this is not the scene, but um, the that you try to bring all these uh, natural elements in this space. I also think children themselves just seem like a container for all of that almost, or they carry the future or hope or of course memory of or childhood. Maybe a question. My question is, do you uh, do you remember, like when you said that you bring in objects that you find on your walks? Do you remember the thoughts that you were thinking about related, like when you saw an object and then you brought it in this space? Do you actually have specific memory, like specific thoughts that you were thinking about at the moment, or is that connected that way or not really?
I have been trying to keep track of my walking. As I told you, the spaces that you see, the forms that you see, the colorful shapes are the path of the walks. And objects that I make. But one thing that I was trying to do, not with this piece specific, right now, but I was trying to bring my memories and trying the memory that I'm talking is the memory of my walks when I was there, where my mind was traveling. Because, so all of a sudden, sometimes you walk and then you lose you don't know where you are. You completely get lost. And that's the, I think, purpose of most of my walks, not when I'm not thinking about creating a space. Because one of the things through the app that I use and that I record these routes is that you have to start from a point and you have to get back to that point. Otherwise, you're not going to create a space. So that form of thinking of when I start a walk that I want to make that object. So it's more about creating that closed path that I can turn it into space. But when I'm just walking, then I don't have that limitation. Then that's where I think more about my ideas and how I bring and what I think at a time. So that tire that you see is more about what I found in the location. So it's more about the specificity and physicality of the space in landscape, and then what you find this trash left over in kind of like a natural setup. And yeah, it's more, some of them are, some of them not, but not in this specific that I can recall and exactly tell you, yeah, this was because I was thinking at the time about this. No, it just came, all of the, one of most of the things, as I said, because when I walk, I think a lot about not having access to this place anymore. When I it maybe it just actually remind me of the talk that Ernesto Pujol has, that he talks about the idea of death, how when you walk you think also about death. And this is something that you always I mean, I personally think about death a lot, and I think I'm ready to die every day because I think I'm going to enjoy that moment forever, because that's going to be stick to me. And I think I'm going to lose that space. Let's put that that way. Like losing the space that doesn't exist, and we can just actually represent as a death. So that was when I was thinking about these tires and bringing these objects that it's not here. But of thinking about that you're not going to have that experience anymore, and this is going to be the last experience that you're going to have in this space.
Wow, this is so beautiful, Minush. Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you. And he was asking, the purple and yellow objects are these sort of landscapes that the kids made, and how were they conceived of?
The purple and yellow objects, I'm not sure which one sort of landscape that the kids made. I don't think the images that the kids created is the ones that they show on the space, and but those forms are the time that I have made this object. So like that yellow and green and purple. Like maybe you, if you're talking about those four purple objects, they were supposed to represent kind of like a community building. There was a fire in between, which you don't see it now. So it was kind of like bringing together, like a sculpturally thinking about the monumentally actually think about the space in yeah, building in a space, monumental in this space, and then just what brings you is just that fire elements in the center. So they are not kids. If you are referring to those objects that I'm talking, kids are only showing their pieces.
Got it. Okay. And also the yellow, like they're more flat. They're flat, but they're they look three-dimensional. Are those also related?
They are some of them are walks, but some of them are the time that I made the objects. So it's about capturing, documenting, making the time into the space. That's the idea.
Cool. Yeah, Manish, I just want to say it's so wonderful to be here, and it's so interesting, like the materiality of like all the different objects, like even seeing landscape represented as like more of a drawing than the landscape, and also like how fragmentary everything feels, like even the children not being able to see their faces. So there's like this like a small reveal, but also this like pushback against being able to see everything in its entirety, which I really like. It keeps me so engaged in wanting to like look at everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie, for coming and your comment. Thanks.
I would be interested in the your when you talked about death, and thank you so much for sharing all of this, first of all. And I would be interested in the connection between when you say that you are ready for death and how much you think about it, and documentation, and documentation in the notion of the recording to have the archive to preserve or uh, to to hold on to,
Mm-hmm.
versus death. And also just wanted to say it was so interesting for me to understand your thinking of creating a closed space by your walks and to arrive to the beginning. That's such a beautiful idea to have a container of your walk that way.
Thank you. And that's why I want everyone to take a picture actually of themselves, because that's the memory that it's going to be now here and then it's going to be lost. So we're not going to have that moment anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm thinking it's not only that I don't think about death. Let me just put it like this idea of losing this space, losing the time, losing the memory of that space. But I think the reason that I said death, because that was a reference in the book. Let me see if I can find it so I can read that for you, because he talks. It might be hard to find. Um, uh, every time I set out to walk a path, no matter how far and long or close and short, are prepared as if it were going to be my last walk, as if I were not going to return from it. In fact, I think that's what he says. I accept my death more than they do. I am ready for it more than they are. So I think this is something that is resonate with me, and I found it very interesting. And he's in his book, he's referring that as a monk, I was trained to keep death close to me. That was neither a friend nor an enemy. I should neither fear it nor desire it. I should simply be mindful of my humbling mortality at all times. And I think that's exactly resonate for me as a Muslim woman. So it's something that we always grew up and think about.